First off, can you share a little about the background of your farm?
I'm Ruth Chantry, a co-owner and farmer at Common Good Farm. And what we do here is we're a diversified, small mom and pop farm. We have laying hens, about anywhere from 450 to 700, a CSA, what else? An annual plant sale we sell at farmers market, some wholesale to restaurants and the food co-op in Lincoln. Help me out, what else do we do?
We have cattle.
Oh yeah, cattle, pastured pork. So a lot of different things that work together on the farm. And we're also certified organic and biodynamic. Well, here, this is our 17th season here. Actually the 13th year on this land. We did 3.5 years prior on land south of Lincoln. And then prior to that, I was on a community farm in Wisconsin for a year. Everett was there a couple years. And prior to that, he had 3 or 4 years on various produce farms in Minnesota, so about 20 years.
What is the history behind the biodynamic movement?
I'm Everett Lundquist, and also a co-owner of Common Good Farm. And a little bit of the history of biodynamics is it goes back to 1923. Some farmers familiar with the work of Rudolf Steiner came to him and asked him to give these lectures on how they could help what they saw as an ailing agriculture. They saw that the animals weren't as healthy, they saw crops were not thriving as well. And alfalfa fields, they would have they could harvest them for 20 years, and the number of years that the field would be viable was going down more and more. So Steiner gave these lectures on kind of how to bring health to agriculture, and he has a very broad scope of things. A little bit of a different perspective on the world, and brought in things that may seem unrelated, but in the end have relationship to health and agriculture. Part of those lectures, he developed what are now known as the biodynamic preparations. They're herbal preparations used in very small amounts, about a teaspoon per 10 tons of each of these preparations, and you put them in the compost pile when it's made, and it can really bring about a profound change in the compost pile, as if compared to not putting them in at all. Since then, since 1923, there's a group of people that Steiner kind of charged with verifying these indications that he gave, and he was very adamant. He was first considered himself a scientist, and very adamant that people just don't believe what he said. It's like, oh, he said it, so it's true. He very much wanted people to go and verify these things with scientific investigation and experimentation, and so for the first 20, 30 years, it seemed like there was a lot of investigation and rigorous looking into his indications, and since then now it's becoming more widely known, more popular. Its effects are becoming more well documented. And it's just going from there.
What are some of the principles and practices behind being biodynamic?
Well, as far as some of the foundations of biodynamics, Steiner thought it was important that the farm be looked at as a whole, not just as its individual pieces. And so he came up with the phrase of looking at the farm as an organism. You want to think about it as being something alive. And in that sense, you think about the farm as almost like a human being. Like you have a digestive system, you have a respiration system, you have communication within itself. And if it's healthy, it can maintain itself. It can prosper. It can radiate out into the world and not only be healthy itself, but also can have a positive influence on its surroundings. So a whole farm organism is one thing, and in that you're trying to create as much fertility on the farm as possible. And it's an ideal. It is actually being accomplished by a number of biodynamic practitioners, but it's difficult to get to that point. You're also trying to create a balanced ecological system within the farm. So in nature, there's lots of diversity. Nature never has a field of one thing. It's always multiples. And so if we're farming and we're creating this field of one thing, then we somehow have to create this diversity around that field. And so for instance, if you have a pest problem like aphids, then the natural predator of an aphid are things like aphid lions or lacewing and ladybugs. And so what do you need to do in order to encourage these things? And they need flowers. They need these tiny little flowers in order to reproduce. And they obviously need aphids, so they're going to eat the aphids if they're around, but they're not going to stick around if they don't have these pollen sources. And they need that in order to lay eggs. So you create the habitat for the beneficial insects to kind of create this balance within the farm. And ideally, the farm's going to take care of its own pest pressures, just like nature. Nature's there's a balance. There's never one thing that just skyrockets, or if it does, it very quickly corrects itself.
In some ways, organic farms, or other farms that try and have sort of strips of these kind of diversity around the edges, that helps to a point, but to have that within, like deeper within the farm, because if it's just around the perimeter, it only goes in so far, and so that's still part of what plays into the whole place and all the diversity that's within, crisscrossing all over, not just around the edges, to kind of meet some requirement or meet some, I don't know, to have some feel-good little edge, even for a conventional farm to leave a part of it. It's still a good thing, but it takes it in a different level, I guess.
Can you go into a little more detail about what it means to be certified biodynamic?
Well, we chose to become certified biodynamic, I think, originally because we saw the benefits of the biodynamic method, and we could just practice it without certification, but we wanted the ability to use the term. It's a trademark term, so we wanted the ability to use that in our literature and really be kind of an educational. Edit that part out, I guess.
Well, it's a presence. By doing it, yes, people would know, but by being able to say we're certified biodynamic, it helps. There's 2 certified biodynamic farms in Nebraska now, one's in Scottsbluff. But that was just a year or so ago they got that. So for the last 15 or 16 years, to be able to say we are this and be able to put that out there as an educational or just make people familiar. And it's changed a lot. I don't know, 15 or 16 years ago, people's eyes would glaze over. They'd never heard of that. And so the understanding has really changed. And there's a huge gap in biodynamic farms. There might be some in Colorado or Wisconsin or Minnesota. I don't know if there's any in Iowa, but it's more of a coast thing, it seems like. And so to be able to create that presence here was important to us. And with biodynamic farms too, they say it's not just it's not the farm, it's the farmer. So much of what the farmer is doing is being brought into the farm, like all good farming. And so it's also education for us, like to have an inspection. It helps if someone that has a bigger or longer background in that comes. The certification for us isn't just you did this and you didn't do that, but here's someone that's really good at that, and inspecting can offer also opportunity, especially in being so isolated from other biodynamic farmers, an opportunity for Everett especially to hear some suggestions or kind of outreach back to us, I think. So it goes both ways.
What motivated your decision to become a certified biodynamic farm?
To be certified biodynamic, you have to be certified organic first. At least even if you're not certified, you have to meet those requirements. And then beyond that, I'll let you do that part.
So beyond meeting the organic certification requirements, you have to use the biodynamic preparations, the compost preparations, the field sprays for at least a full 2 years.
All of them.
Yeah. So, and then 10% of your ground has to be set aside for diversity, and it's encouraged that that is kind of enhanced diversity. Not just like, oh, I'm going to set this little spot aside and just let it go. You're going to actually plant flowers that the beneficial and pollinator insects need, and foster their populations. There's no prohibited materials obviously can be used, so like synthetic insecticides or herbicides. Livestock is encouraged to be a part of the farm, and that's a part of keeping that self-contained system going. It's only really recently that that livestock got removed from farms, and now you have grain farmers and you have livestock farmers. And not that long ago, it was a farm, and they had grain, they had forage, they had livestock as well. And so it's an integrated type system, and it's possible to be certified biodynamic without livestock, but it is a pretty intensive process. You have to really focus on a lot of cover crops, and so yeah, livestock just help in kind of trying to create that fertility cycle. So like we have hay that we feed the cows, for instance, and then we compost that, and we use that in the field for fertility. And yeah.
Can you give some specific examples of certain things you do to be biodynamic on your farm?
One of the unique things about biodynamics are the biodynamic preparations. A lot of the things that happen with biodynamics are also happening on organic farms. The encouraging the beneficial insects and that type of habitat. You can just do that with an organic operation.
Or on-farm fertility.
Or on-farm fertility. So what makes biodynamics unique is the biodynamic preparations, for sure. There are two what we call horn preparations. One has manure that's placed in the horn, and then the other has crushed quartz or silica placed in the horn. And those preparations, the horn manure is used as a soil spray, and it's can be thought of as an inoculant of sorts, but I'd say it's more than that, because you're bringing kind of the influence of the manure in a very unique way to the soil. And the silica spray is more geared towards the plant foliage or sprayed up into the air, and it has to do with how plants utilize sunlight and photosynthesis abilities of the plant. So more specifically with the horn preparations, horn manure, in the fall you take horn manure, or you take manure, put it into a horn, and then you bury it. And fertile ground is preferred, so nice garden soil or otherwise fertile ground. And let it stay in the ground for the wintertime, and then dig it up in the spring. And what you have after that is a material that we call horn manure, and this still has a little bit of the horn shape to it, but it's transformed. It's no longer manure. What it is, it's turned dark brown, very almost clay-like, and
Not manure.
but it's not manure. There's no manure smell to it at all. Very fresh smelling, and you take about a quarter cup of this material and put it into 3 gallons of water. And however many acres, that's how many gallons of water you use. It's 3 gallons per acre. And you stir it in about the biodynamic fashion, where you make a vortex in one way and then you stir it the other way for an hour. And you strain it, and then can spray it on the soil. And there's a number of things happening. You're applying basically a microbial population to the soil. And a former biodynamic farmer passed away here a few years ago, and he actually sent some of this material, some of the horn manure, to a laboratory and had it tested for microbiology. And the lab had never seen a natural material so elevated in levels of microbial activity. So there's something happening. And so you spray this on the soil and you're inoculating it. But there's something else that's going on with biodynamics that asks a person to kind of take a step out of our materialistic world perspective that we have, and basically recognize that in nature there are things that we can't see. Biodynamics, the name itself points to this a little bit. There's bio referring to life and dynamics referring to either energy or force. And there's something that happens, say, like in the formation of a cow horn. Why does it form in this shape? There's something that is creating this shape. It just doesn't kind of just go willy-nilly all over. And so there is a force, you could say, that is involved with the creation of the horn. Manure, there's a stimulating effect of manure on the soil when it's applied. So there's a life-giving quality to that manure. And, why is that? Could you just take some mud and mix it with water and apply it? It's a sloppy material. It's not going to have the same effect. So you're taking the manure, you're putting it into a horn, and Steiner pointed out that the horn has a concentrating effect or a reflecting quality to it. And that you're putting the manure in there, and so you have this life-stimulating material inside the horn, and then burying it in the ground. And it's during the wintertime. And the question I like to ask people when I say, why in the wintertime? Why not in the summer? Is to ask people, when is the earth most alive? People always say the summer. It's winter. If you look at in terms of where is the life flow, like where's the life? The soil in the summertime is actually quite, I wouldn't say dead, but in terms of where's the life flowing,
It's all out.
it's all going out. The trees are leafing out, the seeds are germinating, the insects are coming out of hibernation.
Sap is up.
The sap is going up into the trees, the birds are flying around, the insects emerge from the soil. Everything's going up and out. In the wintertime, just the opposite happens. The sap goes down to the roots, the seeds drop into the soil, the insects burrow into the ground. So if you look at where is the life flowing, in the summer it's flowing up and out. In the winter it's flowing down into the ground. And so it's kind of like the ground is holding the life within it during the wintertime to be expressed then the next year in the summer. So given that, you're taking a horn that has this concentrating effect, and if you ever wonder about whether or not a horn can concentrate something, in the old days when grandmas didn't have hearing aids, or grandpas, they cut the end off and then they'd have their bullhorn for concentrating the sound. So just physically it can concentrate sound. And if you think about a tornado going through the prairie, this right at that point of where that tornado touches, there's an incredibly intense amount of energy. So this shape in nature has a concentrating effect. If you look at nature as form and function, form is always tied to function. So you can kind of use how things look by terms of like what's its role or task in the world. So you have this horn you bury in the ground that's enlivened with a material that enlivens the soil when it's applied, and it transforms in the wintertime. It's not this green kind of manure-y, smelly kind of material anymore. It turns into this brown, humusy type crumbly material that's very sweet smelling, and it's different because if you were to put the manure, say, like in a clay pot or in a PVC tube and bury it right next to the horn,
Or even a clay tile.
it doesn't work. It doesn't change. You dig it up in the spring and it stays green. It's still manure. So something happens inside this. And when you remove this, this material doesn't have it on here, but when you first take the manure out of the horn, it's coated with this white kind of almost mushroomy or spongy material. And anybody that's got a little microbiology background will recognize that as hyphae, which is it's kind of like a fungus, and it's a very beneficial material for the soil. And so you have this really intense material that you're applying with biodynamics. And the goal of the Horn manure is to stimulate soil life, improve humus formation, so long-term organic matter that's in your soil, stimulate earthworm activity. And so you're bringing a little bit of that, kind of that winter enlivened soil condition in this manure that's enlivening in itself, and you're bringing that to the soil in the summertime. And it has a profound effect, both in soil structure as well as organic matter content. And here's the kind of the funny thing about it is that in our soils it helps us increase our organic matter in the soil. In some soils, like a peat soil, if you start applying this Horn manure product, it actually decreases the organic matter.
Can you explain the process behind the compost preparation process?
Well, we could spend a week
in a couple minutes
in a conference on those, because there's a number of them, and each of them has kind of their own unique recipe on how to make them. But just diving into one maybe. Biodynamic preparations. There's 6 of them, and there's yarrow, chamomile, dandelion, oak bark, nettle, and valerian. Is that 6? Mm-hmm. I think so. And all these herbs have a long history of medicinal use with humanity. And so what the intention of these preparations is to bring the healing quality of that herb, or that unique relationship that herb has to its environment, to the compost pile. For instance, chamomile has a very unique relationship to protein and nitrogen. And in the days before refrigeration, and somebody would process meat, a lot of times they would rub the meat down with chamomile, and it would give them 2 or 3 days before the meat would then rot. Whereas they would have to deal with it within a day or 2 otherwise. So when you don't have refrigeration, that's a significant amount of time. If you have an upset stomach or intestinal problems, then you can have chamomile tea, and it'll kind of straighten you out really, really quickly. So that's something unique that herb has that you can bring to that compost pile. So the compost preparations going into the compost pile are used in very small amounts. They're applied in just a teaspoon, and that would be enough of each of those preparations in 6 different holes for a pile weighing approximately 10 tons. So approximately 20,000 pounds. And so these are very small amounts of this of material. And so that in and of itself is asking a person to kind of think about, well, what's going on here? Because it's a very small amount. And each of the biodynamic preparations has a unique relationship to, say, potassium or nitrogen or phosphorus. And what those preparations can do in the pile is help organize that pile, you could say, to better relate or utilize those nutrients within the pile. And so you take that compost and treat it with these medicinal preparations, and then you're applying that compost to your soil. And that soil then has these qualities of these herbs, and then the plants that are grown in the soil can then be influenced. And even the animals and the people then that would be eating the crops from there are influenced by this beneficial kind of soil health, and the relationship that these herbs bring from the compost all the way to the end product. Because the goal of biodynamics is to to grow food with the highest vitality, and thus it's of course vitamins and minerals and fats and carbohydrates and sort of things like that. But there's also a vitality in food that plants are alive. It's an obvious thing, but we so often overlook that. And when we're eating the food, we're actually eating that life, that vitality. and that's a part of the nutrition that we need.
While you make your own preparations, is it possible to buy these preparations elsewhere?
You can purchase them from the Josephine Porter Institute that's in Woolwine, Virginia, I believe. They've been active for a long time. So that's important to share because there are home gardeners or just people that might have 2 acres of vegetables and they're striving to be self-sufficient with it, but it is a hard task to try and gather all the materials. So I think you can buy horns there, and as well as all the preparations, and they offer a lot of information on how to get started, and I think they probably have books and things as well. So yeah, the Biodynamic Farming and Gardening Association is also, they don't sell preparations, but they have lots of information. It's biodynamics.com on the internet, and they have lots and lots of information to share as well.
So some of these preparations may seem kind of far-fetched. Can you explain some of the scientific truths that have been found behind these?
The preparations do seem a little bit odd, just putting manure into a horn, or some of the herbal preparations have some kind of unique parameters, I guess you'd say. But everything goes back a long ways in terms of history. They are using knowledge that's been garnered throughout millennia. But in terms of the modern day science, there's been a number of efforts to kind of verify these things, and Washington State University has done some comparisons with compost piles that have been treated with the biodynamic preparations and then without, tested the materials beforehand, tested them afterwards, and there were significant differences. The organic matter in the compost pile was higher. With compost, when it respires, you're losing carbon, just with the biological process. And the carbon left in the pile, in the biodynamic pile, is higher. And nitrogen levels in the pile remained higher, less of it volatilized into the air. And there's been a lot more research in Europe, where biodynamics is much more widely known at university-type situations, and lots of side-by-side comparisons. There's been conventional organic and biodynamic studies done on some farms, and
especially with topsoil or recreating topsoil and how fast, how deep. Even here, I think in Wisconsin and Washington State, but a lot more about root systems. How many root hairs? How far out does how far does it go? I mean, that's things that they can look at a little more short term, and but I think there's been some pretty significant research on that. So,
one of the things that pops into my head is that biodynamic roots, even compared to organic, but certainly conventional, but the roots on biodynamically treated soil, or start over. One of the things that really jumps into my brain is the roots on plants that are grown in biodynamic soil have 50% more these tiny root hairs. Every plant has these kind of major roots that go out, but then around that root, then there's these little root hairs, and they're greater, 50% greater on biodynamically treated plants. Now, who cares? Except the reason why that's significant is that those tiny root hairs is where there's, you could say, a dialogue between the plant and the soil. And that's where the exchange happens, the symbiotic relationship between soil microbiology and plant nutrition. So say there's phosphorus in the soil that the plant can't get to. Well, there's a certain bacteria that can access that phosphorus, but the bacteria can't live without sugar. Well, the plant's a sugar manufacturer, with photosynthesis. And so what happens is that the plant kind of feeds the bacteria this sugar that they're getting from the sun, and the bacteria then feeds the plant this phosphorus. And that exchange happens on these root hairs. And so the plant has a greater 50% more ability to access nutrients within the soil than organic or conventionally fertilized soils. So that's significant.
What are your typical markets?
Where we sell our goods. At CSA was the beginning of the farm, so that's kind of the heartbeat of the farm. We do the Old Cheney Farmers Market in Lincoln about the first half of the season when we have a lot of plants and rhubarb, and then sometimes we go back in the fall if crops yield well enough. So the CSA, Old Cheney Market, we sell quite a lot to Open Harvest, our eggs year round, and then produce in season and plants as well. On farm some, a few restaurants. I'm trying to think where else. And then the beef and the pork all go direct to, well, I shouldn't say that. A little bit goes to Open Harvest as sausage, but most of it just goes direct to folks that order. So, yeah.
How are you involved in the community?
Well, we have, we take volunteers. I mean, folks volunteer. It's like I'll get random emails. Maybe they don't want to have an internship somewhere, but they just want to come for a couple days or, a weekend afternoon here and there just to see what's going on and kind of get familiar with it. They might have a new interest, and so they're excited, but, obviously need to they have their life otherwise. We have WWOOFers sometimes, which is willing or worldwide opportunities on organic farms. And so we have folks come through that way sometimes. And then mostly for our CSA, but other people can join in. We have monthly, from about April through October, we have monthly field days is what we call them, but work times, group work times. And so folks can come, and we really it's a real boost for us from the CSA folks or whoever wants to come along. And then a social time, potluck, or just a kind of farmer's breakfast or whatever as part of that. And we might have one person, we might have 20 people. And so that helps create the connection for them. I mean, obviously they know us and they know where their food's coming from, but for them to come out here and participate a little, that kind of just broadens the connection. And then, we do some public speaking, not just about biodynamics, but also other, what's going on at the farm or whatever. We have school tours come, anywhere from 3-year-olds to, school tours, but also anything else, diplomats or, singles in agriculture. All sorts of different groups come through. So just looking at diversified farms. And it's changed a lot. When we started, there wasn't a lot of this activity going on, but there's more of it, and there's more organic close to Lincoln, and so and up by Omaha, so there's a lot more of it. So that's a really good thing. I don't know, can you think of other stuff that I didn't think of? I mean, that's just the farm stuff, not the personal, like volunteering somewhere stuff. But
I teach a class at Southeast Community College on just gardening, kind of organic gardening 101, and occasionally we'll do some speaking for classes or workshops or about what we do here.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's always some interaction with the schools and high school and elementary school. And
yeah, there's like someone's coming out this weekend. They're doing something on organic farming for, I think, their high school newspaper, or lots of classes. It depends on the year. Sometimes there'll be a project like at Wesleyan, depending on the book some professor assigns. They might assign like Animal, Vegetable, Miracle, like Barbara Kingsolver's book, and so we'll get sometimes 2 or 3 people that want to come out. They have to write a report or have an experience on a farm. So yeah, that comes in waves, especially you can tell when their papers are due. Yeah, so I don't know, just a little bit all over, it seems like. So, yeah.
What is the most challenging thing about Common Good Farm?
Fitting it all in together, maybe?
yeah, I would say probably it has to do with time management, and getting everything done that needs to be done, and figuring out how to prioritize. Okay, this is going to get done, but this is going to fall to the wayside or something.
And what seems approachable in February is completely different than July. So, yeah.
Which aspects of the farm are you most passionate about?
I like the greenhouse work. I like the plant sale. It's folks different than they're talking about food, but they're also people that are interested in growing things. And so when they come to the plant sale, or I don't know, I like all of it, but I have really enjoyed sharing kind of that gardener passion with people, and they get excited about buying plants and hard to choose and everything. I don't know. I love that people love our eggs and our vegetables. I don't know, it all. The calves are cute. I don't know. Yeah, for me, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, what about you?
I'd say growing food for people
Right.
that I know, and that you get to know, whether or not you're friends when you start, you're friends in the end, and it's really a special way for me to interact with the community. Like you're growing food for your community.
What is your philosophy behind Common Good?
That it's common good. That, yeah, we've had people ask us, what does our name mean? And I think it seems sort of self-evident, but I mean, we're growing. We could have done other things, but we chose to do this, I guess, as service in a lot of ways. I mean, yeah. I guess that was the outset, that we wanted to bring this. Again, there wasn't a CSA. There was hardly any in Nebraska when we started. There's not that many still, but there was one when we started, and they quit shortly after. That we wanted to bring this to this area and be able to serve this area through growing good food.
Common good also refers to that we're looking to take care of not only ourselves and our income, but also it's like, okay, we have animals, take care of the animals, take care of the soil that we have under our care, take care of the insect community, take care of the larger human community that we live in. So it's not one thing that's going to, aspire over the others. It's like, everything is going to be healthy and work for the benefit of each other.
How do you see conditions of farming changing in the future?
There's kind of a duality to that answer, I think. I mean, some things seem like they're getting worse quickly, like with GMOs or transgenic seeds, whatever you want to call it. Especially with that they keep approving things. I don't know. So that seems something that's degrading quickly, especially when you get into perennials like alfalfa, and that's been introduced and planted, or multi-year things like beets. I mean, could potentially that the seed is going over to, somebody that's holding over Swiss chard for seed and their crowns. But also that there's, I think, a lot of changes. Organic was even suspect when we started in a lot of ways. I mean, the increase in the number of organic farms has been tremendous in the last decade. So I think that's positive, that people are realizing that there's things that need to happen, and that how if consumers really do respond by buying better food, then farmers have to respond in kind. Yeah, so I guess that's a broader view. But
And if the trends keep up, the farming, there's fewer and fewer farms in America as time goes on.
quickly.
And to counter that, though, however, organic farms are growing. There's an increase in the number of organic farms.
And there's more smaller farms.
And a lot of smaller farms are getting started up. And so, when the mass of agriculture is actually kind of in this decline and concentration of land into a few, there's a kind of an upsurgence of small organic farms, and it's like that's the sector of agriculture that's growing.
How do you define sustainability?
Sustainability has to not only address the environment and the economics, but it also has to address the abilities of the people. You cannot just work yourselves to the death and to exhaustion all the time and not have rest. So there has to be a balance there. Ideally in sustainability, you're going to be producing a lot of your own fertility. You're going to be producing a lot of your own grain, a lot of your own forage for your livestock. So you're going to have this integrated system that's kind of self-perpetuating. The only input, ideally, would be sun and water.
What things are you doing on your farm that you would describe as sustainable?
I think that we do have all our own fertility on the farm. I mean, Everett brings in seeds for cover cropping, but that's either worked in and or foraged first by the chickens or the cattle and pigs, or maybe all three, just depending on the rotation. So that our fertility is created here. Yeah, I think that's a large part of it. I think we brought in some trace minerals a little bit, but not. And then we look at more like what we aren't doing. I mean, we don't have enough land. We quit haying our own as our cattle herd got larger, so we don't hay our own. But so that's something we've had to bring in.
I would say our cattle herd got larger because we couldn't get people to hay our ground, and so we decided to have it all grazed, and then buy in our hay, because since we don't have vast expanses of land, then there's somebody that's going to cut hay would rather go out and cut a 20-acre field than putz around with a 3-4 acre piece.
Or broken up into little pieces, just the way it's laid out. I mean, some other good things is that we have worked with some of the neighbors to, like, one is restoring some prairie, and it really needed grazing. I mean, they weren't getting the effect that they needed, and they're getting some weeds were taking over, even though they'd done a lot of good planting. So working with them and having our cattle graze over there has created mutually beneficial. We needed the ground. They needed the improved soil. Everett's spread chicken litter over there as well. So that ground is really responding, as well as our own place, to what's been happening. I mean, just our soil here now compared to when we arrived here, I mean, there was no earthworm activity. There weren't very many bugs. Well, there were some bugs, but there weren't, not just the whole dynamic of all of this good and bad bugs. So those have come as well. And then in turn also birds and different kind of wildlife activity wasn't here at the level that it is now. So that's been a huge change and really noticeable, I think, as well as just the soil texture and how nice it's become. So, yeah.
Is there anything you intend to change to become more sustainable?
If we had more ground and we had more hay from our own ground, that'd be nice.
Right.
That's the main, I think, that we don't have enough. Because we use all our own, the cattle manure, they're not just here for the field or for biodynamics, but we use all their, the compost also is our potting mix, so we make all our own potting mix for the greenhouse. So, yeah, I think that's our biggest.
I would like to see if we could, access more land for grazing, so that we could feed less hay, because we do import the hay from other fields, or else create some type of relationship where we're returning some of the fertility to the land that we're getting the hay from. I've thought about trying to go back to leaf mold in terms of a potting mix. In the old days in the greenhouse nursery business, instead of using peat moss, they'd use leaf mold. But how they'd get that is they'd go out and kind of clear off the top litter on the forest floor and then scrape that dark material from underneath it, and it's really wonderful for a potting mix. But so I'm thinking about trying to actually start generating that instead of bringing in peat moss.
And then we also, there's just a lot that we need to accomplish, we think, still. We've outgrown our greenhouse, so we need a much bigger greenhouse, and also looking at how to make that less propane intensive at the times that we do need to run heat. So, I guess just taking everything to the next steps as we can.